a very touching picture of my grandmother. She was at that time Marianne Ford, and even when he was still only 17 or 18, they became engaged, and together they declared that they wished to lead the life of a missionary.
I believe God has guided my choice. The future's obscure, but I simply wish to reiterate that both Miss Ford and myself are willing to spend and be spent, and if needs be, to die, for the cause of Christ among the heathen. Believe me, my dear Mr. Robinson, faithfully and respectfully yours, Arthur Bonsey. We have had a fairly quiet voyage so far. In these voyages, it is not possible to choose one's companions. An opera company is travelling to Colombo. The men and women are much too free with each other, kissing and hugging one another in a very funny way. Dearest love to you all, your ever-loving son, Arthur. My dear Gillison, I arrived here safely on Thursday noon after a rather troublesome journey. It's terribly warm here and very tiring. No news, except that the Chinese are vigorously fortifying Wusong and seem to expect an attack. This may breed trouble. My grapes were a failure, and if you bring any, you will have to be very careful in transporting them. Yours affectionately, Arthur Bonsey.
Converting the heathen was what he wished to do. He was to go out in the country preaching. They'd go to a place which no missionaries had visited before, would get a crowd around them by distributing pamphlets, and then they would have open air service, and the crowd would flock round, sometimes with much interest, sometimes with hostility. The missionaries were stoned if they came to a village that was hostile, and there were some missionaries who were killed.
I have often been beaten by the heathen. On one occasion I visited a market town to preach the gospel and sell books, when the people gathered against me beat me and cast me out of the place with the threat that if I ever returned for the purpose of preaching, they would gouge out my eyes. Well, was my reply, I shall be here again tomorrow. And so I was, and so I continued, patiently enduring daily persecution, until at last I wearied them and succeeded in winning a hearing for his message.
That is my grandfather, that is my grandmother, and that is my mother. One of the problems of being a missionary in China is that when the children reach secondary school age, they would have to come to England to go to a boarding school. All they could do in those days was send letters to each other.
My dear trio, no father ever had more loyal and loving children. We do continue to feel pain and sorrow, but it is not the fierce, tearing, paralysing pain of the actual time of separating. Think of me as only a little farther away in the body, and not farther off in mind and heart. We are making a great sacrifice in being separated. There is not the least doubt about that. But the motive of our separation we can never regret. With dearest love to you all, your loving Pater. How often, oh how often, have I wished that the ocean wide would bear me away on its bosom and land me near thy side.
In the summer months when it was very hot indeed, there's a mountain resort that they could get to by going down the Yangtze. There were no roads. The only way of getting up was by what were called 1,000 steps, and European men, the women and children, were carried up.
The air is very sweet and pure. There are springs everywhere, wild flowers around, and 2 burns. I will not attempt to describe the wild grandeur of this region. It is one of the most magnificent piles of rocks and mountains I have seen in China. The sunsets are incredibly gorgeous, and the clouds are endless in the variety of their forms and manifestations. It is a magnificent sanatorium for the missionaries in this valley. You know that we have had our time of anxiety, happily now over. Little Olive was really very ill. In these tropical climates, folk die of illnesses that would not be thought much of at home. Olive's was a by no means light attack of typhoid, and when her relapses came, it was very disheartening. Minnie could not tear herself away from the little patient. They are now in Kuling, and both are better for the change.
I hope there'd be a map. Yes.
Yeah.
And this is the map.
Fabulous. Oh,
279.
isn't that wonderful?
279. That's another name. Yan Chen Ku Yan Chen maybe. And then another large numbers owners. That's the bouncy.
That is the
Van.
one.
Yeah, that's your other.
那乌鸦呢？
哦，
乌鸦几了？可能。
对，
哎，是。
And actually, that's the 279. No problem.
At that time, this is the front door, the front gate.
It does make sense, actually. What's that? That is the view. With the removal of these buildings here,
Yeah.
there's a
Yes.
big valley. So my mother could have been playing on the hills. Whether my mother would have been playing up here, I rather doubt.
Monday, safe back in Hankow. There's a good deal of sickness here in spite of fine weather. Mr. Jones is still very unwell and typhoid is feared. The mental and physical strain have been greater than I expected. There are great problems here, but I am sure we shall be divinely guided. Fond love, your own Arthur.
In 1910, an outbreak of cholera, and although it hit both my grandparents, my grandfather survived, but my grandmother didn't.
My own dearest mother, what a dear old wonder you are. I am well, and as busy as most of the other bees, gathering honey from every opening flower. Only my flowers happen to be Chinese youths. They have found out that I can sting as well as buzz, and it keeps them wary. Can you imagine me, a stern and hard schoolmaster, very busy with 299 things to get through every day? But what I can't get done, I leave, and sing to myself as I learned when I was a boy. Then what is the use of repining? For where there's a will, there's a way. Tomorrow the sun may be shining, although it is cloudy today. Your loving son, Arthur.
Yes, my grandfather was principal of the Griffith John College.
他的那个就是祖父就是这个博士书院的当时是校长。She has some memories of that. 对，就是这个。这个韦氏纪念堂。
My dear trio, we had the college sports on Friday and they went off very well. The band played a rich and varied selection of tunes in a style a little above the average. Auld Lang Syne, Onward Christian Soldiers, Stand Up for Jesus, and many more. The 22 band boys wear crimson silk scarves over the right shoulder and round the waist. They look quite smart. None of our previous records were beaten, but a boy jumped 5 foot 1 inch. 5 foot 2 inches is our record. I must not stay to write more. Your loving A.B. Let us tell the truth about the Chinaman. I wish that some of our writers would write a novel on a thoroughly good representative Chinaman. Not necessarily a Christian. I wish our playwrights would write a great Chinese play representing what is best and highest in Chinese life. Unfortunately, they do not know it, and that is why they do not write it. Why cannot the Chinaman be represented in his true colours? Not as being evil and amongst the worst characters in the world, but as men and women exactly like ourselves. I have met many great Chinese and have many Chinese friends. When you think of racial barriers as being great obstacles and gulfs that you feel will never be breached, well, there is my experience, and that is enough for me.
was asked to retire and said, no, I'd rather come back. They said we need a younger man, the Missionary Society, and he wasn't allowed to come back. He then stayed in Oxford for the rest of his life. Nothing to mark where it is. It was a very brave life. He went on to do many amazing things, but most of it, like all of our lives, go into the past as history, probably forgotten about. But it's the first time, probably the last time, that I'll ever be here.